Hello and welcome to this lecture on energy balance. So this is a quick lecture and the primary concepts that I want for you to take away from this lecture are understanding what energy balance means. What exactly are we balancing? We're balancing energy that comes into the body through food and beverage with the energy that the body gives off through basic maintenance of life, which is breathing, heartbeat, any and all organ function, circulating blood, basic brain function, as well as something called thermic effect of food and any of the energy required in physical activity. So let's dive a little deeper. Before we really get into this concept in greater depth, I just want to point out that we can basically have energy balance in three different ways. We can have energy balance where our intake of calories is equal to our output of calories. And in that case, an individual would maintain the weight that they're currently at. Again, I want to back up too and say that when we're talking about energy in the concept of nutrition, the unit of energy is the calorie. So all of our food and any beverages that we consume that contain energy in the form of calories. When our bodies use energy, again, for heartbeat, for respiration, for brain function, for blood circulation, for kidney function, for liver function, for digestion, for movement, any of those activities use energy to power that activity, and they use energy in the form of calories. All right, so when intake and output are equal, a person would maintain their current weight. When intake of calories exceeds output of calories, then an individual would likely gain weight. We call that positive energy balance, hence the plus sign here. And when intake is less than output, or when output is greater than intake, then a person would likely lose weight. We would call that negative energy balance. I also want to highlight this little nuance of information. A pound of body weight roughly contains 3,500 calories, or 3,555 to be exact. And so when we're talking about weight gain or weight loss, we can talk about the gain or loss of 3,500 calories. So again, if weight gain is desired, someone might need to be eating an excess of 3,500 calories, ideally over the course of a week, not necessarily in one day, in order to gain that weight. And similarly, if someone was actually trying to lose weight, then we might recommend consuming 3,500 calories fewer than they are exerting. Again, that recommendation would be over the course of 1 to 2 weeks rather than a single day. All right, so let's look at the components of energy expenditure. In a total 24-hour period, the body's going to be burning or utilizing energy primarily in three different ways: basal metabolic rate, thermic effect of food, and physical activity. When we figure out the amount of energy expenditure in a day, again, if a person is trying to maintain their weight, we might then say that they would need to consume that number of calories in a given day to maintain their weight. So we base estimated energy requirement off of these three things. So we get an estimate for how many calories a person's body expends in a day. So to maintain that weight, then consume an equivalent number of calories or an equal number of calories. Again, if weight loss or weight gain is desired, then you would still calculate basic energy expenditure on that particular body, and then you could add or subtract calories if, again, for gain or loss. So we'll look at each of these three components individually. Basal metabolic rate, abbreviated BMR. This is, as I've mentioned, any energy that the body uses to just maintain basic existence. So if you were to lay in bed for 24 hours, you would have a basal metabolic rate. Your body would be burning so many calories just to maintain your existence. So if you just laid in bed, all of these things would be happening over the course of 24 hours. You would be breathing, your blood would be pumping, your body would be maintaining temperature based on the environment you're in. There would be cell turnover, there would be cell breakdown and new cell growth. Hormones would be produced and also broken down, and your nervous system would be functioning. Your brain would still be doing some things. If you're sleeping, perhaps processing memories and things learned from the day before. So even at rest, the body burns actually a fair number of calories, often kind of on average around 1,000 calories per person. That might be, plus or minus 200, depending on the individual, and in particular, depending on the size of the body. But so no matter what, we always have calorie expenditure in the body, and that's called our basal metabolic rate. We can see variations in basal metabolic rate based on the percentage of body fat and lean muscle mass. So lean muscle mass or lean tissue in the body is more metabolically active than fat mass. So someone having more lean muscle mass on their body would likely have a higher basal metabolic rate than someone who has more fat mass compared to lean muscle mass. So in this first example, even though these people weigh 100 pounds difference, because they have roughly the same lean body mass, their basal metabolic rate might be very similar, even though this person weighs 100 pounds more. And again, in this case, these folks weigh about the same weight, but this individual on the looker's left, who has 15 pounds more lean body mass, would likely have a higher basal metabolic rate than this individual, even though they're the same height and weight. So body composition will affect. And then the next component of energy expenditure is called thermic effect of food. This is literally just the energy required to digest our food, absorb the nutrients from our food, transport those nutrients through our blood, and then use those nutrients at the site of the cell and store them as needed. Roughly 5 to 10% of the energy content of a meal would be used to digest the food. The content of the meal, so if we have more fat or more carbohydrate or more protein, would dictate exactly how much energy is used to digest. So carbohydrates and protein require a bit more energy to process than fat does. All right, and then the last component of energy expenditure is physical activity. Physical activity would include what we might call activities of daily living. So, walking from the bedroom to the bathroom or to the kitchen, driving your car, riding your bike to work, or walking in from the parking lot. All, washing dishes, doing laundry, hanging out with friends, all of this might just be activities of daily living. And then on top of that, we could include exercise, so intentional movement like going for a run or riding your bike for an hour or going for a swim. And then physical activity can vary in terms of the intensity. So you might go for a casual jog where you're running at a very easy pace for 30 minutes, or you might run for 30 minutes as fast as you possibly can. So the intensity level would be very different in those two examples. And then also, in addition to activities of daily living and physical activity, we have something called spontaneous activity. This would be like fidgeting in your chair as you're listening to my lecture. If you're someone who can't sit for very long, this would be like getting up every 10 minutes or every 5 minutes to just stretch or go get a glass of water. So those types of things would be spontaneous activity. We can actually calculate the amount of energy required to do activity. So on the next slide, you're going to see a chart of estimations for how much energy a body expends doing various activities. We'll use one example here, which is running at 6 miles per hour. So you'll see on the second bullet down here, running at 6 miles per hour generally requires 0.163 calories per kilogram of body weight per minute of that activity, running at 6 miles per hour. So we have an example of Theo. Theo is going to run for just 1 minute, and Theo's body weight is 90.91 kilograms. So we can plug Theo's body weight into this equation, and we'll see that in 1 minute, with this body weight, Theo will burn almost 15 calories. So if he were to run for 30 minutes, then we would have 15 times 30 minutes would give us the amount of calories Theo is expending in a given 30-minute run. So here you can see this chart. This is actually from the textbook, so anyone who does have the textbook would be able to look this chart up. But you can see a few different types of activities listed here, and the estimated energy, and this is kilocalories per kilogram of body weight per minute, so the same unit of measurement as on the previous slide in the Theo example. So if you wanted to, you could plug your body weight in kilograms into this equation, also multiply the number of minutes that you're doing this activity, and you'll get an estimate of how much energy, how many calories your body uses to do that activity. And then I want to just review a few different ways that energy expenditure can be measured. So calorimetry is the most common way to measure energy expenditure. There's direct and indirect calorimetry. Direct calorimetry is a fairly, I don't want to say invasive, but timely and certainly limiting activity. So someone would literally have to sit in a chamber for 24 hours, and then that chamber would be measuring the amount of heat that the body gives off in that 24-hour period. Indirect calorimetry would be somewhat more invasive, because this machine would be measuring the amount of carbon dioxide coming off of the body. So a mask would be worn for 24 hours and a mouthpiece to collect the expired air and thus be able to measure carbon dioxide. So that's indirect calorimetry. And then doubly labeled water is again a measurement labeling measuring the amount of oxygen and hydrogen given off by the person. So as you collect this information over 24 hours, then you can get a fairly accurate estimate of how many calories that body has utilized throughout the day. And then the equation that we used in class, where you had to plug in your age, your height, your weight, your sex, male or female, and your physical activity level. This is kind of the more modern way of doing it, or it's not more modern, but it's certainly the less invasive way. And a lot of modern apps like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer will ask you for this information, and then they'll use just a mathematical equation to calculate your estimated energy requirement. So by inputting this information, this is somewhat equivalent, though much less accurate, than using direct or indirect calorimetry or doubly labeled water. So much less invasive, completely free, it doesn't cost any money, we don't need this high-tech machinery, and pretty much available to anyone who can access these equations, which are published for free online. So again, plugging in these 5 components about your particular body, and then the equation would guess, okay, based on your age, your height, your weight, your sex, and your physical activity, we estimate that your body is burning 1,500 calories a day. So these apps would make that calculation for you.